Isaac is carrying the wood. Christ is carrying the cross. Isaac is walking to the place with the burden on his back, just as Christ is walking to the place. And tradition holds that it's the same spot, same place. Sometimes tradition is wrong, but in this case, I think tradition is right. Like, here's that same location where Christ, 2,000 years later, will be crushed for our iniquities.
All right, Tony, Genesis 22,
Yeah.
the sacrifice of Isaac. Pretty powerful sermon.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, no, I think it was just heavy. It's heavy, but in a way that kind of just motivated me, and I don't know to what ends, really. It just kind of got me filled up, just thinking of how you were able to say that this is something people can relate to. You just have a trial, and you don't necessarily have a solution or an answer for it, and I think that can resonate with people, especially people who are in the midst of it. But what kind of stuff didn't make it into the sermon?
Yeah, no, I felt very similar, probably presenting it as you felt listening to it, because I mean, like, I have to preach it to myself before I could preach it to anyone else. And so oftentimes we're trying to dig this text out to find some relevant application. And sometimes the relevant application is like, God is awesome and life is hard. And for whatever reason, that's kind of the penetrating message here, which is just that, yeah, there are times when it's unbearable. Like, faith is really hard. Like, it's not an easy thing. And we mentioned the passage where Jesus says, in this world you will have trouble, but take heart, I've overcome the world. So like, this is part of the richness of what it is to be a Christian, is that it's not superficial, it's not trivial, it's hard. And there are times when there's a story in John chapter 6. Jesus has just gone up to the mountainside to pray. So they're trying to make him king. Then he goes up to the mountainside to get away from the crowds to pray. And then he sends the disciples across the sea to go to the other side. And when they're in the sea, it's like scary, there's all this stuff happening. And then he walks on the water. And I've often thought about this. It's like Jesus sent the disciples out into the storm. He knows there's going to be a storm, and he still sends them out there. And Christianity's kind of like that sometimes, where God just sends you into the storm for whatever reason, and you can't write the narrative, and you can't figure it out. And so, yeah, that was kind of the meat of it. But there's a lot of fun, like, external things that I shouldn't call them fun. They're kind of interesting external things, and that I think are worthy of discussing. One is the reiteration of the promise at the very end of the chapter. So we have been hearing the promise, I'm going to make your descendants as numerous as the stars, and make your descendants as numerous as the sand on the sea, or sand on the shore. And here, again, Abraham, after he offers Isaac, God says to him, because you have done this, I'm going to make your descendants as numerous as the stars and as numerous as the sand on the seashore. He says it again. And this time he says something really interesting. He says that he swears by himself. So it's not like I'm swear. God says, I swear on myself, like by my own name, I'm going to swear to you that this is going to happen. It's such a really, really cool moment.
So I know that you guys talk about, as teachers, the repetition in the Bible is not for no reason. It also, it's a throwback to Josh's sermon, because he got to preach on the sacrifice. Wasn't that like he alone, like God alone, walked through that sacrifice when Abraham was sleeping? And that was kind of to the point you're making.
Yeah, the covenant between Abraham and God, I think it's Genesis 15, cuts the animals in half, and God alone walks through it, or the fire walks through it, which is a symbolism of God. But there is a powerful point there. But then there's kind of this other point, which is God makes Abraham follow suit in the covenant of circumcision. Like, does God do what he said he was going to do about giving him descendants as numerous as the stars if he doesn't do circumcision? Does he follows through here? And God says, so there is a point to be made.
So the idea that it's conditional, you're saying?
Yeah, there's a point to be made that it's an unconditional covenant.
Okay.
And I would say there's an equal point to be made that it's a conditional covenant.
It speaks to salvation.
Yeah, I would say so. Probably.
Wait, you don't want to go there?
No, we can do it. Yeah, we can do it. It's free. It's free will. It's free will, and also it's God's decision who's saved. We are predestined, and also we make free will decisions to follow him. And both are interchangeable, and how they all work together, I don't fully understand. We don't have a denomination, but our kind of hermeneutic is that there is God's sovereignty and there is free will, and they're mixed together, and they're like bone and marrow. We can't quite slice it out, and maybe our human mind can't understand it or grasp it fully. But yeah, I think this is very similar to that. So there's conditional promise. Abraham, I believe, if he doesn't offer Isaac, will not be blessed. Abraham, I believe, if he doesn't follow suit in the covenant of circumcision, will not be blessed the way that God promised to bless him. And also, God was going to bless him no matter what.
Man, I just, in your saying that, it just reminds me of the point that you made in the sermon, that he went 3 days to get to the point of sacrificing him.
Yeah.
Forget the point of he woke up early that morning, and that, very likely you humanized that by helping us to understand, like, if you have something going on the next day, if it's a tough business meeting, you're going to lose sleep, let alone sacrificing your son. That makes a lot of sense. But then you have 3 days to wrestle with that up and down, highs and lows. I can't imagine even trying to have a conversation with my son. I mean, it's the last moments I think I'm going to see him potentially. And I have to go, I don't even know how to navigate that, but the weight of that is incredible.
We had some women, I had some women after service come up to me and said, Tony, you'll know that feeling of sleeplessness when your kids are teenagers. When they are going through crisis, sometimes of health or crisis of faith, or the school's calling, or then you'll know. She's like, I believe the interpretation is dead on, because it's in those moments where how could you sleep? Like, 'cause sleep is this like restful thing, but how could you do it? There's nothing else but to get up and to pace and to worry, and then to cry out to God that you're sorry for worrying, and then to try to get some sleep and then not be able to do it. And they were saying, you're going to get it. You'll get it when they're older. We both have young kids. We're not super.
It terrifies me.
I'm terrified by it.
Oh my goodness.
But I think if we humanize Abraham, and you were just to step into his shoes, even if you don't have any kids, you can understand that moment of fighting God's command, the calling he has on your life, fighting it, for day in and day out, and having to take one more step and one more step and one more step. And you can see in the distance the hill on which you're going to kill your son. And you're thinking to yourself, how do I do this? How does this happen?
It makes me think of, I feel like the idea of when your faith is tried, you actually have to get to the point in big moments in your life when you feel that your faith is absolutely put in the furnace. As you said, God puts you in, pulls you out, puts you in, pulls you out. Your faith is not really faith until you have your hand in the air with the knife. Like, he had 3 days to say, I'm being faithful, God. I'm being
really
faithful.
good.
I'm doing what you said.
Yeah.
But he wasn't quite there yet, because there's still time, and he's thinking maybe God will deliver him and he'll switch it up between them. He went all the way to having the knife in the air of, he's broken inside. Like, I can't imagine that turmoil. But I think that's the point we have to get to in the biggest tests of faith in our life.
That's so good.
Is that it's not when it's easy. You're not actually tested. If your faith is being easy, it's because he's built you up with that strength to that point. Now, when you are broken and weak.
Yeah, it's the moments when you're at the crossroads between, I am finally able to decide God's will versus my will. And that crossroad moment is where faith is either displayed or it's showed that you didn't really have it. And that's not to be hypercritical of those who are right there in that decision making process, because I think that crossroads is hard, and it's like, will I let go of this thing? Will I hold on to this thing? And what's funny is you make the turn for good. Abraham wakes up and goes. And then there's another crossroads. It's like, will I still do it? There's another choice. Okay, I can abandon this and come back. And so, Joe Stearns used to say, says the whole point of this life is to test for the next. And I think there's something to that God is going to continuously test you for the life to come, and those are those challenges. But yeah, we see that in the text, but we see it all over. We see it in other stories that are like this. I was thinking about Jonah. He's like tested and then tested again and then tested again, and we're going to see some of the stories that we're looking at in the future, which have that similar testing mechanic to it, where faith is proven in those singular moments of deciding, will I do as God told me, or will I not?
makes me think of Romans 5, where it says, we glory in our tribulation. And I was having a conversation with some brothers recently, and I think that's another defining point, that when you're short of having God and his word and his understanding of his faithfulness and his promises, when you are tested in the world, you might feel oppressed. Things are broken. You get down, downcast. Our response should be to glory in it. You know, God's glory, like open up, reach out to him. Like when you've gone through enough testing, maybe not at the beginning, but when you've gone through enough testing with God, at some point it clicks. I know you're going to do something here. I know you're going to do something that's going to raise me up to be new creation all over again. You're making all things new again.
Yeah.
And that you are not hit so hard. You will be, because again, that threshold has to be met of your faith.
Yeah.
But there's something still that he adds to us each time that pushes you more confidently in there.
Like, it feels as though the apostles are like hammering home this point. Consider it pure joy, my brothers, when you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith will produce. It's like, this is what, like, read Revelation. It's like the cries of the saints go up like an incense to God, and their cries are all about their persecution and their suffering. And I think because we live right now in a moment in the United States and in kind of a cultural moment where, you know, we were talking earlier about, like, you know, Ohio State people becoming, you know, Christians and all this stuff. And it's like, wow, it's so cool. And like football players and even governments are trying to figure out their whole faith thing. And because we live in a moment where, like, Christianity is allowed, we don't think about those trials the way those guys thought about those trials, because those trials are, you know, persecutions and you know, Jesus says it in Mark. He's like, I'm going to give you, anybody who's left home or brother or, you know, for me and my sake will receive, you know, he describes it, and then he says, and also along with persecutions. And so because we don't experience persecution all that much, I don't think we have the taste for the glory of suffering that our first century brothers and sisters did. We don't, you know how, like, you didn't like olives as a kid? It's like you had to acquire the taste, you know? And I think you acquire the taste for suffering because you realize what it does for you in your relationship with God.
Wow. Yeah, I think that was a great formulation of bringing that down. And ultimately, as you know, in the sermon, on the mountain of the Lord, he will provide.
It will be provided. Yeah.
So then the ram comes up, and it's God's faithfulness at the end to this covenant. You know, that, you know, it's not going to be more than you can bear. But anyway, maybe you want to. What else you got from this?
Yeah. The only other thing that I would mention is we can't move on from that text without talking about how closely related to Jesus Isaac is in the story. I mentioned this in the sermon, but, like, Isaac is carrying the wood. Right. Like, Christ is carrying the cross. Isaac is walking to the place with the burden on his back, just as Christ is walking to the place. And tradition holds that it's the same spot, same place. Sometimes tradition is wrong, but in this case, I think tradition is right. Like, here's that same location where Christ, 2,000 years later, will be crushed for our iniquities and will be sacrificed, and God's only son will be killed. And even that line, here, take your son, your only son. It's like, I heard the word only son. Like, where else do we hear that line, only son? It's like, well, it's in the New Testament, as Jesus is called God's only son. And I think we can't miss that God was showing us what would happen years later, and that we would be reminded that on the mountain of the Lord, it will be provided. Not just a way out to protect our son from his slaying, but a way out from what is the most difficult challenge in our lives, our sin, that ultimately would either lead us to a place of condemnation or a place of redemption. And it's because Christ was the lamb in the bushel and also was the son to be slayed. We have a chance to have glory with God. And I, you know, every lesson points us right back to our Lord Jesus Christ. And I'm just so thankful that this one does it in such a clear and obvious way.
And it's the micro and the macro, as well as, you know, this relates to you, but also the saving of humanity and things like that. And it makes me think how you'll reference the arc of the Bible. And it's funny because there's a bit of, story and context in the Bible. Then we're met with the sacrifice of the son. There's 3 days of tribulation before it.
Oh, that's another thing. 3 days. I didn't even talk about that.
Into the sacrifice, but then on the other end, it's the sacrifice, and then the 3 days in, where Jesus is, like it says, into the earth. So just that, it's amazing. And then there's more of the story of the Bible afterwards, kind of bringing us back into the garden. The garden's on either ends of these sacrifice. Just, pulling from the things you guys have taught over the years. Yeah,
it's like the picture. It's like the picture. The narrative arc of the Bible. Men are good in God's garden, placed there to be stewards of it, to help the place grow and to flourish and to make this a beautiful world and to be co-creators with God. And they fall and stumble, and then God is continuously setting in motion the ark to bring them back to the place they need to be, redeeming the world. And so you have that arc, it's happening all the way through, and every once in a while, God's like, Jesus. Jesus. Like it's like, unless you're looking for it, you don't see it. But then it's like, oh wait, Noah, there's an ark. Oh wait, they're in a boat, and the boat helps save them. Wait, it's like, oh wait, Isaac, boom. It's just Jesus all over the place. And and so whenever we get to pause and have those moments, are just they're so special for me.
Yeah, it is wonderful because it's Jesus in this parable form in the Old Testament.
Yeah, it's great.
He's like a living parable in these stories, but also in the Christophany that keeps showing up. Like you said, you did not withhold your son from me.
Yeah.
It also makes me think about what was I never, again, highlighted this in my mind reading it, that Abraham says, we will both come back to you, talking about the servants that went to him.
Yeah.
I never even picked that up.
Yeah.
It's silly to not have, but I thought it was amazing. I said, yes, father of faith. All right.
Yeah, it's right. It's the Hebrews 11 passage. He reasoned. He reasoned because God said it was through Isaac that your offspring will be reckoned. So God can't lie.
Yeah, it made that Hebrews passage come more alive to me. I was like, there's the meat on the bone.
Yeah, he's like, God won't lie. So if God won't lie, then I don't know what's going to happen. I mean, that's so faith, right? It's like, God promises this will be for my good. I don't know how it'll all play out, but I know it'll be for good. So let's just make it happen. Right. And this is Abraham. He goes, no, it is going to be through Isaac that my offspring is reckoned, which means I'm going to kill him. I'm going to burn him up. And then God's going to bring him back to life. Crazy. Wow. Yeah. It's awesome.
So is that kind of everything you think?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, there's probably other things that I'm forgetting, but I love these talks. I think they're wonderful.
Yeah, I just want one more thing, going back to what I think this sermon showed me, and what I think it may be offered to people, is in being married, and I've learned that sometimes you can't just fix something. Sometimes you just need to be there and just be there. And for having my daughter, just be there and let her cry or let her feel her big emotions and things like that. And I think that's maybe why this sermon was one of the reasons why it was so wonderful, is that sometimes people just need to not be met with, you can fix your life. Yeah. It's that, yes, pain is difficult. There is pain. There is a threshold that feels unbearable. Yeah. And that is still in the will of God. That is not outside of his plan. And we may not have answers, but we have God's love and his compassion and a family here in the church to help us go through it. And the testimony was
Lisa,
perfect.
Just incredible.
Yeah, Lisa Bender, it paired so well with this.
I mean, you said it so well. I think that's, there's a difference between like you're in sin and you need to be kind of not coaxed, that's not the right word. You need to be encouraged. You need to be kind of going, hey, I think you can stop this. You need to be, saved from the flames. You need to be kind of like pulled out. Hey, like stop. I don't think, like those types of conversations. And then there's another place, which is just sometimes God puts you in a test. And it has nothing to do with sin, has nothing to do with you. You can't do anything about it. And to have people come alongside you, the text says we mourn with those who mourn and we rejoice with those who rejoice, which means that there is a place for us finding people, brothers and sisters, who are suffering and going, I will suffer with you. Yes. I'm not here to help. I'm not here to fix, because I can't. This is a divine appointment you have with God, and you're only going to figure it out when you finish wrestling with him. But I'm going to be here, and I'm going to mourn with you, and I'm going to cry with you, and you're not going to be alone in the mourning. You're not going to be alone in the suffering. You're not going to be alone in the heartache. And I'm going to sit beside you, and I'm going to love you. And I think maybe because we're so fast-paced, maybe because we have no patience for discomfort. But I would love to see that in my own life as I do it for other people more. I would just love to see more of just the sitting with, the rubbing of the back, the saying I love you, and I'm here, and I'm here for you. And I think if we can be that, we can be a little bit more of God's people we could be more specifically aligned with God's desire for us, I think, in our community than if we try to do anything else.
Reminds me of the one thing Lisa said towards the end. She thinks if it wasn't for the faith of her friend when she didn't have any herself to lean on, that she doesn't think that any of the other miracles that came place after the fact could have come about. I think that's a wonderful thing for us. If we're not in the fire right now, we should be looking for somebody in our fellowship to support and to be that faith they can lean on.
Yeah, what a great encouragement. I hope that we would take that.
Thanks, brother.
Love you, bro.